The neighbors were already lined up against the chain-link fence when the ambulance arrived. Blue and red lights flashed against the two-story brick houses of our quiet Atlanta suburb. Mrs. Jenkins from next door had her phone out, recording everything. But what she saw was something no one had ever seen before. The paramedics were not bringing out one person. They were struggling to wheel out a single stretcher with 2 people on it. Under the white sheet, you could see 4 legs kicking wildly. The screaming was not just from pain, it was from pure humiliation. They were begging the doctors to separate them right there on the driveway. But the lead paramedic just shook his head and said they needed surgery. As they loaded my screaming wife and her lover into the back of the van, I stood on the porch sipping my iced tea. They could not be separated. Not yet. Because I had made sure of it with a tube of industrial-grade PVC pipe glue rated for 500 pounds of pressure. My name is Otis, and I am a 58-year-old HVAC master. I fix leaks for a living, but when I found a leak in my own marriage, I decided to seal it shut permanently. Before I tell you how I pulled off the stickiest revenge in history, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you believe cheaters deserve exactly what they get. It started just 3 days earlier on a Tuesday afternoon. My wife Vanessa walked past me in the kitchen, wrinkling her nose. She told me I smelled like grease and Freon. Vanessa is a real estate agent now, and ever since she started selling million-dollar homes in Buckhead, she looks at me like I am the hired help instead of her husband of 20 years. She threw her car keys on the counter and told me her Mercedes needed detailing because she had a VIP client the next morning. She said she did not want my work truck parked in the driveway because it was an eyesore. I took the keys without saying a word. I have always been the quiet one, the one who fixes things in the background. I went out to the driveway and started cleaning. I was vacuuming under the driver's seat when the nozzle hit something hard. I reached under and pulled out a purple plastic bottle. It was a tube of personal lubricant. Forest berry flavor. I sat there on the hot concrete holding that bottle, and my hands started to shake. Vanessa and I had not shared a bed in 6 months. She told me she was going through early menopause and had no drive. But this bottle was half empty. She was not tired. She was just tired of me. I did not storm into the house. I did not scream. In my line of work, if you lose your cool around high-pressure systems, people get hurt. You have to be precise. You have to be calculated. I took the bottle into my garage workshop. The smell of oil and metal calmed me down. I looked at the shelf where I keep my industrial supplies. My eyes landed on a canister of heavy-duty PVC solvent cement. This is the stuff we use to bond main sewer lines. It melts the surface of the material to create a permanent seal. It dries clear, and it sets in less than 30 seconds. I walked over to the sink and squeezed the rest of the berry lubricant down the drain. Then I took a syringe and carefully filled the purple bottle with the industrial glue. It looked exactly the same. It even had the same consistency. I wiped the bottle clean and walked back out to the car. I slid it right back under the seat exactly where I found it. I knew she would not check. She was too arrogant to think I would ever suspect anything. I finished cleaning the car and parked it perfectly in the spot she wanted. That night I slept like a baby, knowing that the next time she tried to betray me, she would be stuck with her decision forever. That Tuesday afternoon, the Georgia sun was beating down on the driveway, hot enough to fry an egg on the asphalt. I stood there holding the keys to Vanessa's Mercedes, while she looked at me with that expression she had perfected over the last 5 years. It was a look of pure disgust mixed with pity. She adjusted her silk blouse and told me that she had a showing in Buckhead the next morning for a client who played for the Falcons. She said the car needed to be spotless inside and out. Then she wrinkled her nose and took a step back from me. She said, "Otis, you smell like a crawl space. Please shower before you get inside my car. I do not want the leather absorbing that stench." I watched her walk back into the house we bought 20 years ago. The house my plumbing business paid for. The house where I installed the central air conditioning unit with my own hands so she would never have to feel a drop of sweat. She slammed the door, and I was left alone with the heat and the humiliation. I did not argue. I never argued anymore. I just walked to the garage and grabbed the bucket and the vacuum. I am a man who works with his hands. I have been an HVAC master and a plumber for 35 years. My hands are rough. My fingernails are permanently stained with grease and PVC primer. My knees pop when I crouch down. Vanessa used to love these hands. She used to say they were strong hands that built our life. Now she looked at them like they were covered in disease. I opened the door of her silver Mercedes. The air conditioning was still cold inside. It smelled like her expensive perfume and something else. Something like men's cologne. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I started with the floor mats. I scrubbed them until they looked brand new. Then I moved to the vacuuming. I pushed the nozzle into every crevice. I am thorough. That is why my clients trust me. If there is a leak, I find it. If there is a blockage, I clear it. I do not cut corners. I slid the driver's seat all the way forward to get the vacuum nozzle underneath. That was when I heard it. The plastic clunk of the vacuum sucking up something too big to pass through. I turned the machine off and reached my hand into the dark space under the seat. My fingers brushed against smooth plastic. I pulled it out. It was a purple bottle, about 6 inches tall. The label featured a picture of juicy berries and the words "Forest Berry Pleasure Gel." I sat back on my heels on the driveway, staring at the object in my hand. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart started hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Vanessa and I had not been intimate in 6 months. Before that, it was maybe once every 3 months. Every time I tried to touch her, she would pull away. She would say she was too tired, or she had a headache, or she just did not feel clean when I was around. She told me her drive was gone. She said it was menopause. She said her doctor told her it was normal for a woman her age to lose interest. I believed her. I supported her. I stopped asking because I did not want to pressure her. But the bottle in my hand was not old. It was brand new. And it was half empty. I unscrewed the cap and squeezed a tiny drop onto my finger. It was cold and sticky and smelled like artificial strawberries. This was not something you buy by accident. This was not something you keep under the driver's seat unless you are using it on the go. The realization hit me harder than a sledgehammer. She was not tired. She was not going through a biological change that killed her desire. She was just using that desire on someone else. And they were doing it in the car. In the car I paid for. In the car she made me clean because I was too dirty to ride in it. I looked at the house. I could see her silhouette in the kitchen window pouring herself a glass of wine. She was probably texting him right now, laughing about how she got her husband to detail the love nest. The rage that rose up in my chest was hot and blinding. I wanted to march inside and throw the bottle at her. I wanted to scream until the neighbors called the police. But then I looked at my hands. These dirty, calloused hands that she hated. These hands were not made for violence. They were made for fixing things. They were made for solving problems with mechanics and chemistry and pressure. I stood up. I did not go to the house. I walked into my garage. The garage was my domain. It was the only place in the house Vanessa never entered because she said it smelled like chemicals and metal. I walked past the rows of wrenches and pipe cutters. I walked past the copper tubing and the condenser units. I went straight to the locked cabinet in the back, where I kept the industrial supplies. I took out my keychain and unlocked the metal doors. On the bottom shelf sat a metal can with a red label. Heavy-duty PVC solvent cement. We call it the gray death in the trade. It is not just glue. It is a chemical solvent designed to fuse plastic pipes together at the molecular level. When this stuff dries, it does not just stick things together. It melts the surfaces and fuses them into one solid piece. It is rated to withstand 500 pounds of pressure per square inch. It is waterproof. It is heat-proof. And once it sets, it is permanent. The only way to separate two pipes joined with this cement is to cut them apart with a saw. I took the can down to my workbench. I grabbed a clean syringe from my toolkit. I use these for injecting dye into AC lines to find leaks. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I was in work mode. I was a master technician diagnosing a problem and applying a solution. I took the purple bottle of lubricant over to the sink. I squeezed the remaining forest berry gel down the drain. I turned on the hot water and rinsed the bottle out until it was completely clean. Then I dried it with compressed air to make sure there was not a single drop of water left inside. I opened the can of solvent cement. The fumes were strong and sharp. It smelled like justice. The color was a translucent gray, almost exactly the same shade as the berry gel I had just washed away. I dipped the syringe into the can and drew up the thick liquid. Carefully, with the precision of a surgeon, I injected the industrial glue into the purple bottle. I filled it to exactly the same level it had been before. I wiped the rim clean. I screwed the cap back on. I gave it a little shake. The viscosity was perfect. It moved inside the bottle just like the lubricant. If you did not smell the chemical fumes, you would never know the difference. And I knew that in the heat of the moment, in the back of a car with the windows rolled up and the radio playing, nobody stops to sniff the bottle. I looked at the tube in my hand. It was no longer a sex toy. It was a weapon. It was a trap. It was a contract that once signed could not be broken. I walked back out into the blinding sunlight. The heat hit me again, but I did not feel it. I felt cold. I felt calm. I opened the car door and leaned back under the driver's seat. I placed the bottle exactly where I had found it. I positioned it so the label was facing up, just waiting to be grabbed. Vanessa thought I was a simple man. She thought I was just a paycheck with dirty fingernails. She thought she could use me and discard me and laugh about it with her lover. She forgot one thing. You do not mess with a man who understands how things are connected. You do not disrespect the person who builds the foundation you stand on. I finished vacuuming the rest of the car. I wiped down the dashboard. I polished the windows until they sparkled. I did the best job I had ever done. I wanted everything to be perfect for her meeting. I wanted her to feel comfortable. I wanted her to feel safe. When I walked back into the house to put the keys on the counter, Vanessa did not even look up from her phone. She just waved her hand at me and said, "Hope you got the smell out, Otis." I looked at her back. I looked at her perfect hair and her expensive clothes. I said, "Yes, Vanessa. It is all taken care of. Everything is exactly where it belongs." I went upstairs to take a shower. I scrubbed my hands with heavy-duty soap until they were raw. But I was not washing off the grease. I was washing off the last 20 years of trying to please a woman who despised me. I stood under the hot water and waited. I knew it was only a matter of time. The trap was set. The bait was in place. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The following Saturday was the kind of Georgia afternoon that makes the air feel thick enough to chew. It was 90 degrees in the shade, and the humidity was rising off the grass like steam. I had been up since 5 in the morning prepping the smoker. I had 3 racks of ribs and a brisket that had been marinating for 24 hours. Cooking was my way of keeping my hands busy. If my hands were busy, they could not form into fists. If my mind was focused on maintaining a perfect 225 degrees inside the smoker, I did not have to think about the temperature rising inside my marriage. Vanessa had spent the morning rushing around the house hiding anything that looked too working class. She hid my work boots in the closet. She took down the picture of me and my crew from the hallway. She wanted everything to look perfect for her sister Kendra and her husband Brad. Brad was a financial advisor who drove a foreign sports car and wore loafers that cost more than my weekly paycheck. He was the kind of man who had soft hands and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. They arrived at 2 o'clock. Brad parked his massive white SUV right behind Vanessa's Mercedes in the driveway, blocking me in. He stepped out wearing a polo shirt that was unbuttoned, one too many buttons at the top, and sunglasses that looked like they belonged on a pilot. Kendra followed him, looking tired and worn down. Kendra was a sweet woman. She was a nurse who worked double shifts at the pediatric hospital. She loved Brad blindly, even though everyone in the family knew he treated her like an accessory he could put on a shelf when he was done with her. I walked over to greet them, wiping my hands on my apron. Brad looked at my grease-stained fingers and hesitated before shaking my hand. He gave me a weak grip, like he was afraid he might catch a callus. "Hey, Otis, looking good, buddy," Brad said with that fake enthusiasm. "Still playing with pipes and toilets, I see. You know, I was looking at your portfolio the other day. You should really let me manage your retirement. A guy in your line of work usually burns out by 60. You do not want to be crawling under houses when your knees give out." Vanessa laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, Brad, do not worry about Otis," she said, touching Brad's arm a little too familiarly. "He is happy in the dirt. Some people just do not have the ambition for the finer things." I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. I looked at my wife. She was wearing a white sundress I had bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She looked beautiful, and she looked at Brad like he was the only source of water in a desert. I looked at Kendra. She was busy getting a salad out of the trunk, trying to ignore the way her husband and her sister were standing just a little too close to each other. I took the salad from Kendra. "Good to see you, Kendra," I said. "You look nice." "Thanks, Otis," she smiled. "The ribs smell amazing. You always make the best barbecue in the county." At least someone appreciated it. We moved to the backyard. I went back to my station at the grill. It was my fortress. From behind the smoke, I could watch them. I saw the glances. I saw the way Brad's hand lingered on Vanessa's lower back when he handed her a drink. I saw the way they whispered to each other while Kendra was setting the table. They thought they were being subtle. They thought I was just the dumb plumber who was too focused on his meat to notice his wife slipping away. But I saw everything, and I knew something they did not. I knew what was waiting under the driver's seat of that Mercedes. The afternoon dragged on. We ate. Brad made a show of critiquing my brisket, saying it was good, but he knew a place in the city that used Wagyu beef. Vanessa hung on his every word, laughing at jokes that were not funny. The tension in my chest was building. I felt like a pressure valve ready to burst. I kept checking my watch. I did not know when it would happen, but I knew the trap was set. Around 4 o'clock, the ice bucket ran dry. It was a small thing, a trivial detail, But in the script of an affair, every small inconvenience is an opportunity. "Oh no," Vanessa said, looking into the empty cooler. "We are out of ice. And we are low on wine, too." I started to step forward. "I have bags of ice in the chest freezer in the garage," I said. Vanessa cut me off instantly. "No, Otis, that ice smells like fish. You keep your bait in there." "I cannot put fish ice in Brad's drink." Brad stood up, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "I can make a run to the store," he said. "It is just down the road, right?" "I will go with you," Vanessa said, jumping up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the patio stones. "I need to pick up a specific bottle of Chardonnay that Otis always forgets to buy. Plus, you do not know the way to the good liquor store." Kendra looked up from her plate. Her eyes were sad, but she forced a smile. "That is nice of you, honey," she said to Brad. "Do not take too long." I stood there by the smoker, holding my tongs. I watched them. This was it. This was the moment. They did not need ice. They did not need wine. They needed 10 minutes alone. They needed a quick thrill. "We will take my car," Vanessa said as they walked toward the gate. "Otis just detailed it. It is spotless. And your SUV is blocking the driveway anyway." "Perfect," Rad grinned. "Let us take the Mercedes for a spin." I watched them walk around the side of the house toward the driveway. My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. I knew exactly what was going to happen. They would get in the car. They would not go to the store. Not yet. The store was 5 minutes away. But the urge they had, the arrogance they shared, would make them want to steal a moment right there in the driveway. They would think it was exciting to do it right under my nose. I stayed in the backyard with Kendra. She was telling me about a difficult patient she had that week. I nodded and made the right sounds, but my ears were straining. I was listening for the sound of an engine starting, but the engine did not start. 1 minute passed. Kendra was talking about hospital administration. 2 minutes passed. I imagined them in the front seat. I imagined Vanessa reaching under the seat. I imagined her fingers closing around that purple bottle. I imagined the excitement, the haste, the rush of adrenaline that makes people careless. 3 minutes passed. "Otis, are you listening to me?" Kendra asked gently. I blinked and looked at her. "I am sorry, Kendra. I was just thinking about the heat." "It is really hot today," she agreed. "I hope they have the AC on in the car." "Oh, they do," I said. "They definitely do." 4 minutes passed. And then it happened. It started as a low sound. A muffled cry that I might have mistaken for a bird if I was not waiting for it. But then it grew. It rose in pitch and intensity until it was undeniable. It was a scream. But it was not a scream of fear. And it was definitely not a scream of pleasure. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated shock, followed immediately by a howl of agony. Kendra dropped her fork. "What was that?" she asked, looking toward the house. "It sounded like Brad," I said calmly. My voice was steady, cold. Then came another voice. Vanessa. She was shrieking. "Get it off! Get it off! Oh my God, it burns!" Kendra jumped up. "Oh my God, did they get into an accident? Did the car explode?" She ran toward the gate. I followed her, but I did not run. I walked. I walked with the slow, heavy steps of a man who knows exactly what he is going to find. We rounded the corner of the house and looked at the driveway. The Mercedes was sitting there gleaming in the sun. The engine was not running, but the car was rocking. Violent spasms shook the chassis. The screams were coming from inside. It sounded like two wild animals trapped in a cage. Kendra ran to the passenger door and yanked it open. "Brad, are you okay? What is happening?" The smell hit us first. It was the sharp chemical tang of industrial solvent mixed with the sweat of panic. Inside the car was a scene from a nightmare. Brad was in the driver's seat, pants down around his ankles. Vanessa was straddling him, facing him. They were locked in an embrace, but their faces were contorted in horror. "Help me," Brad screamed. His face was purple. "Help me getting her off. She is stuck. She is stuck to me." Vanessa was clawing at the dashboard, tears streaming down her face, mascara running in black rivers. "It is burning," she shrieked. "It is burning my skin. I cannot move. I cannot pull away." Kendra stood frozen in the open doorway, her hands covering her mouth. Her eyes went wide as she processed what she was seeing. Her husband, my wife, in my car. I walked up behind Kendra and looked inside. The purple bottle lay on the floor mat, empty. The label Forest Berry Pleasure Gel was facing up, mocking them. "What did you use?" Brad yelled at Vanessa. "What the hell was in that bottle?" "I do not know," Vanessa sobbed, pulling futilely, trying to lift herself up. Every time she moved, Brad screamed in agony. The bond had set. The chemical reaction was complete. The PVC cement had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had fused the surfaces together, skin to skin, membrane to membrane. I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "It looks like you two are in a bit of a bind," I said. "Otis, do something," Vanessa screamed at me. "Do not just stand there. Call 911. It hurts. It feels like acid." I looked at the bottle on the floor. Then I looked at Brad. He was looking at me with terror in his eyes. He knew. In that moment, he looked at my face and he knew. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I did not dial 911 immediately. Instead, I opened the camera app. I switched it to video mode. Kendra was sobbing now, leaning against the hood of the car. "How could you?" she whispered. "How could you do this to me?" They did not answer her. They were too busy screaming. I hit record. The red dot started flashing. "Well," I said, my voice calm and clear over their shrieks. "I guess you wanted to be together. I just made sure you would stick to your decision." Brad reached for a towel to try and cover himself, but he could not reach it because he was pinned. "Otis, please," he begged. "It is tearing. It feels like my skin is ripping off. Please help us." I zoomed in on the empty bottle. Then I panned up to their terrified faces. "I am calling the ambulance," I said. "But not because I want to save you. I am calling them because I want everyone to see exactly what you are." I dialed those 3 numbers. As the operator picked up, I looked at my wife. She had stopped screaming and was just whimpering now, the realization of her destroyed life settling in deeper than the glue. 911. "What is your emergency?" the operator asked. "I need an ambulance to 42 Oak Street," I said. "I have 2 people who have had a chemical accident." "What kind of chemical, sir?" "Industrial PVC cement," I said, looking Brad dead in the eye. Brad dead. They seem to be glued together. And I do not think they are coming apart anytime soon. The 10 minutes before the ambulance arrived were the longest 10 minutes of Vanessa and Brad's lives. It was also the first time in 20 years that I felt completely in control. The Georgia heat was relentless inside that car, even with the doors open. The chemical reaction of the PVC cement was generating its own heat now. I knew from experience that as the solvent cured, it got hot. Not hot enough to cause third-degree burns, but hot enough to feel like a branding iron. Brad was hyperventilating. He was a man who built his life on appearances. He was the guy who made sure his lawn was manicured and his suit was tailored. Now he was trapped in a luxury car with his pants around his ankles, fused to his sister-in-law. He kept trying to push Vanessa away, instinct taking over reason. But every time he pushed, the bond held firm and the skin around it stretched and tore. His screams were guttural. "Stop moving!" he yelled at her. "You are ripping me apart!" Vanessa was sobbing hysterically. Her makeup was ruined. Her perfect hair was matted with sweat. She looked at me standing there with my phone, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of hatred and begging. "Otis, please stop recording," she cried. "Please help us. Think about my career. Think about what people will say." I did not stop recording. I held the phone steady. I zoomed in on their faces. I said, "Vanessa, you did not think about my dignity when you brought him into my car. You did not think about Kendra when you laughed at her behind her back. Why should I worry about your reputation now?" Kendra was sitting on the grass near the driveway. She had her knees pulled up to her chest and her face buried in her hands. She was a nurse. She dealt with trauma every day. She had seen car accidents and heart attacks, but she had never seen her husband and her sister in a position like this. She was rocking back and forth, making a low, keening sound that broke my heart. I wanted to comfort her, but I knew I could not. Not yet. This poison had to be drawn out completely before the healing could start. Then we heard the sirens. The sound started as a distant wail and grew louder until it filled the air. Blue and red lights began to bounce off the white siding of my house. The noise drew the rest of the neighborhood out. Mrs. Jenkins from next door came out to her porch. The Johnsons from across the street came out. People I had waved to for 10 years were now standing at the edge of my lawn, craning their necks to see what was happening at the quiet plumber's house. A police cruiser pulled up first, followed immediately by the ambulance. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters, ready for a domestic dispute. They walked up the driveway looking tense. When they saw the situation inside the car, their professional masks slipped. One of the officers, a young guy, looked away and covered his mouth to hide a cough or maybe a laugh. The older officer just stared, his eyes wide. "What do we have here?" the older officer asked, trying to keep his voice authoritative. I stepped forward. "I am the homeowner," I said calmly. "These 2 are trespassing in my vehicle, and they seem to be stuck." The paramedics rushed past at the police with their bags. They were ready for trauma. They were ready for blood. They were not ready for physics. The lead paramedic, a heavy-set woman named Brenda, leaned into the car. She put on gloves and assessed the situation. She reached out and touched the skin where their bodies met. Brad screamed again. "Don't touch it," he yelled. "It is raw. It feels like fire." Brenda looked back at her partner. "It is a chemical bond," she said. "Looks like some kind of strong adhesive. We cannot separate them here. If we pull them apart, we are going to deglove the skin. We have to take them as they are." "As they are," Vanessa shrieked. "You cannot take us like this. You have to separate us. I cannot go to the hospital like this." "Ma'am," Brenda said, her voice stern. "If we cut you apart right now, you will bleed out. We need a surgeon to do this properly. We have to move you." The logistics of moving them were a nightmare. And it was a nightmare that played out in front of an audience. By now, there were 20 people on the sidewalk. Phones were out. The flash of cameras cut through the late afternoon sun. The paramedics had to make a decision. They could not transport them sitting up. They had to get them onto a stretcher. But they were attached front to front. This meant they had to walk them out of the car together in a clumsy crab-like shuffle. "Okay, listen to me," Brenda told them. "On the count of 3, you are going to stand up together. Do not pull away. Move as one unit. 1, 2, 3. They stood up. It was a grotesque dance. Brad had to waddle with his pants around his ankles. Vanessa had to cling to him to keep from tearing her skin. They shuffled out of the car into the bright sunlight. The crowd on the street went silent for a second, and then a murmur of shock rippled through them. I kept my phone raised. I was live streaming now. I had opened my Facebook app and hit the Go Live button. I had never done it before, but I figured today was a good day to start. I spoke to the camera, my voice clear and steady. "Folks, if you are just tuning in, you are watching history. That is my wife, Vanessa, and that is her sister's husband, Brad. They thought they could sneak around in the dark. They thought they could disrespect their families. But as you can see, I believe in keeping families together." The paramedics brought over the stretcher. They lowered it to the ground. "You have to lie down," Brenda ordered. "Side by side is not going to work. You have to lie one on top of the other." It was the ultimate humiliation. To fit on the narrow hospital gurney, Vanessa had to lie down first, and Brad had to lie on top of her. They were forced into the very position they had chosen for their pleasure, but now it was their prison. As they were strapped down, the police officer walked over to me. "Sir," he said, "did you do this?" I looked him in the eye. "Officer, I am a maintenance man. I fix things. I found a loose seal in my marriage and I applied the appropriate industry standard bonding agent. I did not force them into that car. I did not force them to use that bottle. They chose the location. They chose the lubricant. I just ensured the quality of the bond." The officer looked at me. He looked at the crying nurse on the lawn. He looked at the 2 cheaters being loaded into the ambulance. He saw the empty tube of PVC cement on the floor of the car. He knew exactly what had happened. He knew it was a trap. But he also knew that technically I had not touched them. "We will need a statement," he said quietly. "But for now, you might want to call a lawyer." I nodded. "I already have one," I said. As the ambulance doors began to close, I walked up to the back bumper. The paramedics were hooking up IV lines. Vanessa was staring at the ceiling of the ambulance, tears running into her ears. Brad was squeezing his eyes shut, wishing he could disappear. I pointed my phone right at them for one last shot. "Hey, Brad," I called out. He opened his eyes. "You said you wanted to manage my retirement because I was just a dumb plumber," I said. "Well, I just managed your assets. And Vanessa, you wanted a bond that would last forever. You got it." The doors slammed shut. The engine roared to life. The siren wailed again, signaling their departure. I turned the camera back to my face. I looked into the lens, addressing the hundreds of people who were already watching the stream. "True love is hard to find," I said. "But once you find it, you should stick to it. My name is Otis. And this is just the beginning. Watch this space because the cleanup is going to be expensive." I ended the live stream. The adrenaline was starting to fade, and I felt the exhaustion settling in. But then I looked over at Kendra. She was standing up now, wiping her face. She looked at the ambulance disappearing down the street, and then she looked at me. There was pain in her eyes, yes, but there was something else too. A spark of anger. A realization that she was free. I walked over to her. "I am sorry you had to see that," I said. She took a deep breath. She looked at the driveway where the empty glue bottle lay. "Don't be sorry, Otis," she whispered. "It hurts. God, it hurts. But at least now I know. At least now they can't lie anymore." I put a hand on her shoulder. Come on inside, Kendra. The barbecue is ruined, but I think I have some ice cream in the freezer. And we need to talk. Because what you saw today was just the physical part. We have a lot of paperwork to go through before they get out of surgery. We walked back toward the house, leaving the neighbors to gossip at the fence. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the lawn. The first battle was won. But the war was just starting. And unlike them, I was not stuck. I was moving forward. The surgery took 5 long, grueling hours. I sat in the sterile waiting room of Grady Memorial Hospital, watching the clock on the wall tick away the minutes of my life. The plastic chair was hard against my back, and the coffee from the vending machine tasted like burnt rubber, but I did not move. Kendra sat across from me, still wearing her nurse scrubs, which were now wrinkled and stained with tears. We did not speak much. There was nothing left to say. The entire hospital knew who we were. The nurses whispered behind their hands when they walked by. The receptionists cast side glances at us. My live stream had gone viral, and the local news vans were already parked outside on the street waiting for a statement. When the surgeon finally came out through the double doors, he looked exhausted. He pulled off his surgical cap and rubbed his forehead. He walked over to us, and his expression was grim. He told us that they had managed to separate them, but the damage was extensive. The industrial PVC cement I had used was designed to fuse plastic pipes at a molecular level. It did not just stick to the skin, it had chemically bonded with the epidermis. To get them apart, the doctors had to perform what they called a skin graft separation. They essentially had to remove the skin from Brad's inner thighs and Vanessa's lower abdomen because the tissue had fused together into a single mass. The doctor used words like degloving and third-degree chemical burns. He said they were both in stable condition, but they would be in severe pain for weeks, and the scarring would be permanent. Brad would never wear shorts again without people staring. Vanessa would carry the mark of her infidelity on her stomach for the rest of her life. I thanked the doctor and stood up. I thought that was it. I thought the punishment had been delivered, and now we would just deal with the divorce papers. I was naive. I was a man who worked with pipes and valves where the laws of physics are fair and predictable. I forgot that I was now stepping into the world of men like Brad. Men who use money and influence to bend reality until it breaks. An hour after the surgery, while Brad was still groggy from the anesthesia, his first phone call was not to his parents or his children. It was to his lawyer, and not just any lawyer. He called Marcus Sterling, the kind of defense attorney whose face is on billboards all over Atlanta, the kind who costs $500 an hour, just to pick up the phone. I was walking toward the exit, ready to go home and feed my dog, when 2 men in suits blocked my path. They were not doctors. They were detectives. Behind them stood a tall man in a tailored gray suit, holding a leather briefcase. It was Sterling. He looked at me with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Mr. Otis Jackson?" the detective asked. I nodded slowly. The air in the hallway suddenly felt very thin. "Yes, that is me. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back," the detective said, reaching for his belt. "You are under arrest." For what I asked, my voice echoing in the quiet hallway. I did not touch them. I was not even in the car. The detective spun me around, and the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked tight against my wrists. It was a sound I will never forget. A sound of finality. "You are being charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault in the first degree, 1 count of premeditated battery, and 1 count of reckless endangerment with intent to cause great bodily harm," the detective recited. I looked at Kendra. She had covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with terror. "This is a mistake," she cried out. "He did not do anything." They were the ones cheating. They were the ones who used the bottle. The lawyer Sterling stepped forward then. He smoothed his silk tie and looked down at me like I was something he had stepped in on the sidewalk. "Actually, ma'am," Sterling said, his voice smooth like oil, "your brother-in-law here set a booby trap. Under Georgia law, tampering with a product to cause injury is a felony. My client, Mr. Bradley, and his companion, Ms. Vanessa, have given a sworn statement. They claim that Mr. Jackson has been exhibiting erratic and violent behavior for months. They claim he threatened to kill them. They claim he planted a chemical explosive device disguised as a personal product, with the specific intent to maim and permanently disfigure them." I stared at him in disbelief. Explosive device. Violent behavior. I was a man who spent his weekends smoking brisket and fixing air conditioners for the church. Vanessa said that I asked. My wife said that. Sterling smirked. "Your wife states that you are a jealous, controlling individual who could not accept that her career was surpassing yours. She says this was an act of domestic terrorism designed to destroy her livelihood and her physical beauty. She is currently giving a statement detailing years of psychological abuse. We are pushing for the maximum sentence. 10 years in state prison, Mr. Jackson." The detectives walked me out through the automatic doors. The cameras were waiting. The flashes went off like lightning, blinding me. Reporters were shouting questions. "Mr. Jackson, did you intend to glue your wife to her lover? Is it true you have a history of domestic violence? Do you feel any remorse for disfiguring them?" They paraded me past the news vans like a trophy. I saw my reflection in the window of a parked car. I saw a middle-aged black man in work clothes, handcuffs behind his back, surrounded by police. I knew exactly what that image looked like to the world. To the world, I was not the victim of betrayal. I was the angry, dangerous husband. Brad was the victim. Vanessa was the victim. They were the white-collar professionals lying in hospital beds, swathed in bandages, and I was the blue-collar thug being hauled away. I was placed in the back of the squad car. The seat was hard plastic. The cage between me and the officers was made of wire mesh. As we drove away toward the county jail, I watched the city pass by. I had serviced the HVAC systems in half the buildings we passed. I had built my reputation on honesty and hard work. In the span of 3 hours, that reputation was being shredded. At the station, they took my belt and my shoelaces. They took my wallet and my phone. They fingerprinted me, my hands still rough from years of labor pressed onto the ink pad. They took my mugshot. "Hold the placard higher," the officer barked. "Look straight ahead." I sat in the interrogation room for hours. The metal table was cold. The mirror on the wall was one way. I knew they were watching me. Eventually, the detective came back in. He threw a file on the table. "Look, Otis," he said, sitting down and loosening his tie. "He played the good cop. I saw your video. I know what they did was messed up. Any man would be angry. But you cannot go around putting industrial glue in things. That is premeditated. That is malice. I did not put glue in things," I said calmly. "I simply repurposed a container for my work supplies. I am a plumber. I use PVC cement every day. I store it in various containers. If someone comes into my workspace, steals my supplies, and misuses them, is that my fault?" The detective sighed. "Do not play games with me, Otis. We found the receipt for the glue. We found the empty lube bottle in your trash can. We have the search warrant for your house. We are going to find everything. And your wife, she is painting a very ugly picture of you. She is saying you have a temper. She is saying you are unstable. And with that video you posted, you gave them all the ammunition they need. You humiliated them publicly. That shows intent to harm." He leaned forward. Brad has money, Otis. He has a lot of money. And he has a lot of friends in this town. He is going to sue you for everything you have. The medical bills alone are going to be in the hundreds of thousands. The pain and suffering lawsuit will be in the millions. And that is if you manage to stay out of prison, which I doubt. You are looking at a decade behind bars. I leaned back in my chair. I thought about the safe in Brad's office. I thought about the secrets Kendra and I had yet to uncover. I thought about the arrogance of a man who thinks he can sleep with another Saham and then send the husband to jail for it. I want my phone call, I said. The detective shook his head. You just do not get it, do you? You are done. You are buried. Maybe I said, or maybe I am just digging the trench before I lay the pipe. I spent that night in a holding cell. It smelled like bleach and urine. I lay on the thin mattress, staring at the concrete ceiling. I closed my eyes and I could still hear Vanessa's screams. But now her voice in my head had changed. It was not screaming in pain anymore. It was screaming accusations. Liar, abuser, monster. She was trying to flip the script. She was trying to turn her sin into my crime. She wanted to take my freedom, my business, and my dignity. But she forgot one thing. She forgot that I was a man who knew how to handle pressure. She forgot that before you can fix a system, you sometimes have to shut it down completely. Brad and Vanessa thought they had won this round because they had the lawyers and the lies. They thought the handcuffs on my wrists meant the game was over. They did not know that I had already planted the seeds of their destruction. They did not know that Kendra was out there and she was angry. And they definitely did not know that while they were plotting to put me in prison for assault, I was preparing to put them in prison for fraud. The cell door clanged shut, echoing down the long concrete corridor. I was alone in the dark, but I was not afraid. I was focused. The glue was just the warning shot. The real war had just begun. They let me out on bail 48 hours later. My lawyer had to call in a favor to get the bond reduced because the judge was looking at me like I was a menace to society. I walked out of the county jail into the blinding afternoon sun, wearing the same grease-stained work clothes I had been arrested in. I felt dirty. I felt tired. But mostly, I felt a naive sense of relief. I thought the worst was over. I thought I could go home, take a shower, and sleep in my own bed while the lawyers sorted out the mess. I was wrong. The nightmare was not ending. It was just changing venues. I took a cab to 42 Oak Street. As we turned the corner, I saw it. My house. The house I bought in '98. The house where I raised my children who were now away at college. The house where I had laid every tile in the bathroom and installed every light fixture. But I could not go in. There was a sheriff deputy parked in the driveway. He stepped out as the cab pulled up. He was holding a piece of paper. "Mr. Jackson," he said, his hand resting on his belt. "You cannot be here." I looked at him confused. "This is my house. I pay the mortgage." "Not anymore," the deputy said. "Your wife was granted an emergency temporary protective order this morning. You are to stay 500 yards away from the residence and 500 yards away from Mrs. Jackson at all times. If you step onto this property, I will have to arrest you for violating a court order." I stood on the sidewalk, the heat radiating off the concrete. But my clothes, my tools, my medicine. The deputy shook his head. "You have 5 minutes to grab essential items. An officer will escort you." That is it. I walked into my own home like a criminal. The locks had already been changed. I could see the fresh wood shavings on the doorframe. Vanessa had not wasted a second. I grabbed a bag and threw in some shirts, my blood pressure medication, and my spare work boots. I looked at the photos on the mantel. They were gone. She had already scrubbed me from the house. When I walked back out, the deputy handed me another paper. It was a notice from the bank. I tried to use my debit card at a gas station 10 minutes later to buy a bottle of water and a sandwich. Declined. I tried again. Declined. I called the bank. The automated voice told me the account was frozen due to pending litigation. That was our joint account. The account where I deposited every check from every plumbing job for the last 30 years. Vanessa had drained her personal savings years ago on purses and shoes, so we lived out of the joint account. Now she had locked it. She had petitioned the court claiming that Fran was a flight risk and that I might hide assets. I was a 58-year-old man with $40 in his pocket, standing in a gas station parking lot, and I had nowhere to go. But the financial freeze was nothing compared to the assassination of my character. I sat in my work truck, which was the only thing she had not managed to take because it was registered to my LLC. I turned on the radio. The local talk station was buzzing. They were talking about me, but they were not talking about the husband who caught his wife cheating. They were talking about the angry, violent man who mutilated a prominent local financial advisor. Brad's PR machine was working overtime. Brad came from a world I did not understand, a world of country clubs and connections. He was white, he was wealthy, and he knew how to play the victim. The narrative was spinning so fast, I could practically hear the whirring. According to the news, Brad and Vanessa were victims of a premeditated hate crime. They painted Brad as an innocent family friend who was comforting Vanessa regarding her abusive marriage when I snapped. They used words like jealous rage and savage attack. I pulled out my phone, which the police had returned to me. I opened social media. It was a bloodbath. Brad's lawyers had released a statement. It said, "Otis Jackson has a history of instability. We are grateful to the first responders who saved the victims from this torture." There was a photo of me they were using on the news. It was not a photo of me smiling at my daughter's graduation. It was a photo from a job site where I was covered in soot, holding a large pipe wrench, looking tired and grim. They put that photo next to a photo of Brad in a tuxedo, smiling at a charity gala. The contrast was deliberate. The beast and the gentleman. The angry black laborer and the sophisticated white professional. They did not mention the affair. They did not mention the sex. They made it sound like I had glued them together for talking. Then my phone started ringing. It was Mrs. Higgins. She was one of my oldest customers. I had fixed her boiler every winter for 15 years. "Hello, Mrs. Higgins," I answered, hoping for a friendly voice. "Otis," she said, and her voice was cold. "I am calling to cancel our service contract." "Mrs. Higgins, why? You know me. You know I saw the news, Otis. We have grandchildren in this house. We cannot have someone with your temper working around our family. Please do not come back here." The line went dead. 5 minutes later, another call. The general contractor for the new apartment complex downtown. A contract worth $50,000. "Jackson, we have to let you go. The developers are worried about the liability. We cannot have a guy with pending assault charges on the site. Bad for the brand. Bad for the brand." I sat there in my truck as the sun went down. My phone kept lighting up. Cancellation. Cancellation. Hate mail. Threats. I had spent 40 years building my name. Otis Jackson HVAC and plumbing meant quality. It meant trust. In one afternoon, Brad and Vanessa had turned my name into a warning label. I drove my truck to a Walmart parking lot. I parked in the back corner under a flickering light. I could not afford a motel. I could not go to my friends because I did not want to bring this trouble to their doorsteps. I climbed into the back of the van. It was cramped, filled with copper pipes, bags of cement, and heavy tools. The smell of PVC primer and stale fast food filled the air. I cleared a space on the metal floor, moving a coil of wire and a bucket of joint compound. I laid down a dirty drop cloth as a mattress. I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the highway. My back ached. My stomach growled. I was a master craftsman. I was a provider. I was a father. And now, I was a homeless man sleeping next to a toilet flange. I checked my bank balance on my phone app one last time. Negative. I looked at the photos of Vanessa on my phone. The woman I had loved. The woman I had worked 18-hour days for so she could drive that Mercedes. She was somewhere comfortable right now. Even in the hospital, she was in a private room, probably with flowers and sympathy cards. She had the house. She had the money. She had the narrative. She had stripped me of everything. Or so she thought. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the one thing the police had missed. The one thing I had grabbed from the house in my 5-minute rush. It was not money. It was not jewelry. It was a small, crumpled receipt I had found in Vanessa's trash can weeks ago. A receipt for a consultation with a divorce attorney dated 3 months before the glue incident. She had been planning this. The affair with Brad was not just lust. It was an exit strategy. They had been planning to take me down long before I bought that glue. The glue just gave them the excuse they needed to speed up the timeline. I curled up on the hard metal floor of the van, using my work jacket as a pillow. A rat scurried somewhere in the parking lot. I closed my eyes. They thought they had buried me. They thought taking my house and my money would break me. They forgot that I am a man who works in the dark. I am a man who crawls under foundations where the rot hides. Let them have the house. Let them have the press. Let them have the sympathy. I had my truck. I had my tools. And I had the truth. Tomorrow I would find Kendra. Brad thought he was untouchable because he controlled the money. But every system has a pressure point. Every pipe has a weakness. And I was going to find his. I drifted off to sleep to the sound of sirens in the distance, dreaming of pipes bursting and walls coming down. The isolation was not a prison. It was a workshop. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of rain hammering against the metal roof of my work van. My neck was stiff and my mouth tasted like stale coffee. I was a man who had built a comfortable life with my own 2 hands, and now I was washing my face with a bottle of water in a Walmart parking lot. I checked my phone. There were 12 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably reporters or lawyers. But there was one text message that stood out. It was from a number I did not have saved, but the area code was familiar. The message was short. Meet me at the Waffle House on Piedmont. Come to the back booth. Please. It was signed with the letter K. I knew who it was. Kendra. I debated whether to go. My lawyer had told me to stay low, but Kendra was the only other person who had seen the truth with her own eyes. She was the only one who knew that I was not a monster. I started the engine of my truck. It groaned in protest, but it turned over. That truck was like me, old, battered, but it refused to quit. The Waffle House was empty except for a few truck drivers and a waitress who looked like she had been working since the 70s. I saw Kendra sitting in the furthest booth away from the windows. She was wearing a hoodie pulled up over her head and dark sunglasses even though it was raining outside. When I slid into the booth opposite her, she flinched. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen and red. Her hands were shaking as she held a mug of black coffee. "Otis," she whispered, taking off the glasses. "I did not think you would come." I looked at her. I saw the same pain in her face that I felt in my chest. We were the collateral damage. We were the ones left behind in the wreckage. "How are they?" I asked. My voice was rough. She let out a bitter laugh. "They are miserable. They are in separate rooms now, but the doctors say the skin grafts are taking. Brad is already talking about suing the glue manufacturer. Can you believe that? He wants to sue the company that made the glue for making it too strong." That sounded exactly like Brad. Never take responsibility, always find someone else to blame. "Why did you call me Kendra?" I asked. "You should not be seen with me. I am the villain now, remember." Kendra reached into her purse. She pulled out a thick envelope and slid it across the greasy table. Her expression changed. The sadness was still there, but something else had crept in. Rage. Cold, hard rage. "I went to our house yesterday," she said, "to get some clothes for the kids. Brad has a home office. He always keeps it locked. He says it is for client confidentiality. But he was in the hospital, and I knew he kept a spare key in his golf bag." She paused and took a sip of coffee. Her hand was shaking so much the liquid rippled. I went inside Otis. I wanted to see if there were pictures of her. I wanted to hurt myself with the truth, I guess. But I did not find pictures. I found bank statements. She tapped the envelope. "He emptied the accounts, Otis. The joint savings, the investment accounts, even the college funds for our twins. It is all gone. There is almost $400,000 missing. He transferred it all out 3 days before the barbecue." I stared at the envelope. This was not just an affair anymore. This was a heist. "Where did the money go?" I asked. She shook her head. "That is the thing. I do not know. The statements show transfers to a company called Obsidian Holdings. I looked it up. It does not exist. It is a shell company. But there is an address on one of the invoices. It is for a commercial building downtown, the one where Brad rents his private executive suite." She looked me in the eye. "He is not just leaving me, Otis. He is stealing our children's future. He is planning to run. And I think he is planning to take your money too." I felt a chill run down my spine. Vanessa had frozen our accounts. Brad had drained his. They were pooling their resources. They were building a war chest to destroy us and then disappear into the sunset. "What is in the executive suite?" I asked. Kendra reached into her pocket again. She pulled out a silver key card and a small brass key. "This is the key card to the building lobby, and this is the key to his private office on the 14th floor. He keeps a floor safe in there. I saw him use it once. If there is proof of where the money went, it is in that safe." She pushed the keys toward me. "I cannot go there, Otis. The building has security guards. They know me. If I walk in there, Brad will know within 5 minutes. But you are a ghost right now." I looked at the keys. This was breaking and entering. This was burglary. If I got caught violating the restraining order was bad, but this would be a felony. I would go to prison for 20 years. But then I thought about my empty bank account. I thought about the lies they were telling about me on the news. I thought about Kendra's kids who would not be able to go to college because their father wanted to play house with my wife. I took the keys. "Does the building have a service entrance?" I asked. Kendra nodded. Around the back. But there are cameras everywhere. I smiled for the first time in days. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knows his trade. Cameras only watch the doors, Kendra. They do not watch the air. That night, the rain had turned into a thunderstorm. It was perfect cover. Thunder would mask the noise and the rain would keep people off the streets. I drove my van to the alley behind the high-rise building where Brad had his office. It was a glass and steel tower, the kind of place that charged you $10 just to breathe the air in the lobby. I did not use the key card for the front door. That was for amateurs. I pulled my extension ladder off the roof of my van. I put on my tool belt. I grabbed my cordless drill, my reciprocating saw, and a headlamp. I looked like exactly what I was, a repairman coming to fix a problem. I climbed the ladder to the roof of the loading dock. From there, I was able to access the external fire escape. I climbed up 14 flights of stairs in the pouring rain. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. When I reached the roof of the main building, I was soaked to the bone, but I was in my element. I walked across the gravel roof until I found the main HVAC unit for the 14th floor. It was a massive industrial system, a Carrier 20-ton unit. I knew this machine better than I knew my own children. I knew how it breathed. I knew how it moved. I used my drill to unfasten the service panel on the return air plenum. The metal sheet came away with a soft clang. A blast of cool, conditioned air hit me in the face, smelling of office carpet and ozone. I shone my flashlight into the darkness. The ductwork was large enough for a man to crawl through if he did not mind the dust and the claustrophobia. I did not mind. I had spent half my life in crawl spaces. I squeezed my body into the metal tunnel. It was tight. I had to pull myself forward with my elbows dragging my boots behind me. The sound of the rain faded, replaced by the low hum of the circulation fans. I counted the vents as I passed them. Kendra had drawn me a map. Brad's office was the corner suite. That meant it was at the very end of the main trunk line. I crawled for 20 minutes. My knees were scraping against the galvanized steel. Dust bunnies danced in the beam of my headlamp. Finally, I reached the end of the line. I peered through the slats of the diffuser vent. Below me was a room bathed in the orange glow of the city lights coming through the window. I saw a mahogany desk. I saw a leather chair that probably cost more than my truck. I saw a painting of a sailboat on the wall. This was it. I used my drill to quietly remove the screws holding the vent in place. I lowered the grate down gently, placing it on a bookshelf. Then I lowered myself down. I hung by my fingertips for a second and dropped. I landed silently on the plush carpet. I was in. The office smelled like Brad. It smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. I walked over to the desk. I did not touch the computer. Computers have logs. Computers leave digital footprints. I was looking for the physical proof. I found the safe under a rug in the corner, just like Kendra said. It was a digital floor safe. I did not have the combination, but I did not need it. I was a man who knew how things were built, which meant I knew how to take them apart. I did not try to crack the code. Instead, I took out my borescope camera, the long, flexible camera I used to look inside pipes. I slid the tiny lens into the gap between the safe dial and the housing. It was a cheap model, a fire safe, not a security safe. I could see the tumblers. It took me 10 minutes of fiddling, but finally I heard the click. The handle turned. The heavy door swung open. I shone my light inside. There were stacks of cash, rubbery bands holding together bricks of $100 bills. But I ignored the money. I grabbed the file folders. I sat on the floor and opened the first one. It was labeled Obsidian Holdings. I started reading and my blood ran cold. This was not just about hiding money from Kendra. This was a roadmap of fraud. There were documents here showing transfers from elderly clients' accounts into this shell company. Brad was not just stealing from his family. He was running a Ponzi scheme. He was churning his clients' accounts, stealing their life savings, and funneling it all into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. And then I saw it. The document that made my breath stop. It was a power of attorney form. It had my name on it. And it had my signature at the bottom. But I had never signed it. I looked closer. It was a forgery. A perfect forgery of my signature. And the date was from 2 weeks ago. Attached to it was a deed transfer for the land my workshop sat on. The land my grandfather had left me. The land that was now worth millions because of the new stadium being built nearby. Brad and Vanessa were not just going to divorce me. They were going to declare me mentally incompetent, using the assault charge as proof. Then using this forged power of attorney, Vanessa was going to sell my land to Brad's shell company for pennies on the dollar. They were going to steal my legacy. They were going to sell my grandfather's sweat and blood to build their new life in the Caribbean. I felt a wave of nausea. This was evil. This was pure, calculated evil. I took out my phone and started taking pictures of every single page. I photographed the cash. I photographed the ledgers. I photographed the forged signature. I was just finishing when I heard a noise. It was the sound of a key card beeping at the main office door down the hall. Then the heavy thud of the magnetic lock disengaging. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. And voices. "I told you to check the office," the security guard's voice said. The motion sensor on the HVAC unit tripped. "It might be a rat, but we have to check." I froze. I was trapped. The vent was too high to jump back into quickly. The door was the only way out, and security was 10 seconds away. I looked around the room frantically. There was nowhere to hide. The desk was open underneath. The curtains were sheer. Then I saw the door to the adjoining private bathroom. I grabbed the files and the cash. I threw them into my tool bag. I dove into the bathroom just as the office door handle turned. I stood in the dark bathroom holding my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. I heard the guards walk into the office. Flashlight beams swept across the room. "Everything looks clear," one guard said. "Wait, look at the vent," the other one said. "The grate is missing." I gripped my heavy pipe wrench. If they opened the bathroom door, I would have no choice. I was not going back to jail. Not tonight. Not when I held the evidence that could burn their entire world to the ground. I waited. The handle of the bathroom door jiggled. It was locked. "Do you have the key for the can?" the guard asked. "No, it is downstairs." "Forget it. It is probably just maintenance working on the ducts, and they forgot to put the grate back." "Let us go. I want to finish this coffee." I listened as their footsteps retreated. I listened to the main door beep and lock again. I let out a breath that I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. I waited another 10 minutes just to be sure. Then I stepped out of the bathroom. I looked at the safe. I left it open. I wanted Brad to know. I wanted him to come back here and see that empty metal box. I wanted him to feel the same panic I felt when my card was declined. I climbed back up into the vent, dragging my heavy bag behind me. The crawl back to the roof was harder. My muscles were burning. But the bag weighed a ton, and every ounce of it was justice. I made it back to my van just as the sun was starting to crack the horizon. The rain had stopped. The city was waking up. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the stack of files in my lap. I picked up my phone and dialed Kendra. She answered on the first ring. "Otis, are you okay?" I looked at the forged signature again. "I am better than okay, Kendra," I said. "I have the smoking gun. And it is not just a gun. It is a nuclear bomb. Get a lawyer, a real one, because we are about to blow the roof off this entire city." I sat in the passenger seat of my van, parked in the shadow of an abandoned warehouse 3 miles from the city center. The morning sun was just starting to cut through the gray clouds, but inside the cab, the air was heavy and cold. Kendra was sitting next to me, holding the stack of papers we had stolen from Brad's safe. Her hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the shock of what we were reading. I picked up the document that had made my heart stop in the office. It was a property deed transfer. I knew this document. I knew the legal description of the land by heart. Lot 42, District 9, Fulton County. It was the address of my workshop. It was the 3 acres of land where I parked my trucks, where I stored my pipes, and where I had built my business from the ground up. But this land was more than just a place of business. It was my history. My grandfather Silas bought that land in 1952. He was a black man in the Jim Crow South who worked 3 jobs to save enough money to buy a piece of dirt that he could call his own. He bought it with crumpled dollar bills and a dream that his grandsons would never have to bow their heads to anyone. He made me promise on his deathbed that I would never sell it. He said, "Otis, they can take your money, and they can take your pride, but do not ever let them take the land, because land is the only thing that lasts." I looked at the piece of paper in my hand. The transfer date was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before the barbecue. 2 weeks before I found the lube under the seat. According to this document, Otis Jackson had sold the land to a company called Obsidian Holdings for the sum of $10. $10. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the page. It looked like mine. It had the same loop on the O and the same sharp cross on the T. Vanessa had spent 20 years watching me sign checks and contracts. She had practiced. She had perfected my hand. But she missed one thing. I always press hard on the downstroke of the J. It is a habit from using heavy markers on construction sites. This signature was light. It was airy. It was a forgery. Kendra turned the page. "Otis, look at this," she whispered. Her voice sounded hollow. It was an email printout. It was a correspondence between Brad and a developer named Construct Corp. The subject line read, "The Emerald Heights Project." I read the email. It outlined a plan to demolish my workshop and the surrounding old warehouses to build a luxury condominium complex. High-rise glass towers with a rooftop pool and a concierge service. The estimated value of the project was $40 million. My land was the keystone. It was the centerpiece they needed to make the project work. Without my 3 acres, the whole deal would fall apart. I had refused offers to sell that land every year for the last decade. Developers came knocking with suitcases of cash, and I always sent them away. Vanessa knew that. She knew I would die before I sold Grandfather Silas's legacy, so she decided to take it. But the worst part was not the theft. The worst part was the plan on how to get away with it. I found a memo clipped to the back of the deed. It was titled "Strategy for Incompetency Filing." I felt the blood drain from my face as I read the bullet points. Step 1. Provoke a violent outburst. Step 2. Document evidence of unstable behavior and paranoia. Step 3. Secure arrest and psychiatric hold. Step 4. File for emergency guardianship due to diminished capacity. I dropped the paper on the dashboard. My hands were numb. It was a setup. The whole thing was a setup. The affair with Brad was real, yes. They were sleeping together. But that was just the perk. That was just the fun part. The real goal was not love. It was not passion. It was money. Cold, hard, life-changing money. They knew I would never divorce Vanessa if it meant splitting the land. They knew I would fight tooth and nail. So they came up with a better plan. They decided to make me crazy. They wanted me to find out. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The lube bottle under the seat. It was not a mistake. Vanessa was meticulous. She never left things lying around. She left that bottle there on purpose. She wanted me to find it. She wanted me to confront them. She expected me to scream. She expected me to throw a punch. She expected me to do exactly what they told the police I did. They wanted a domestic violence charge. They wanted a police report that said Otis Jackson lost his mind and attacked his wife. Once I was in jail awaiting trial, they would use the power of attorney to declare that I was suffering from early onset dementia or a mental breakdown. They would argue that I was a danger to myself and others and that my assets needed to be managed by my next of kin. My wife. She would get guardianship. She would get control of the company. And she would sign the final papers to sell the land to Brad's shell company. By the time I got out of jail or the mental hospital, the workshop would be gone. The bulldozers would have leveled my grandfather's history. The glass tower would be rising. And Brad and Vanessa would be sitting on a beach in the Caribbean with $40 million laughing at the old plumber who went crazy. The glue incident. They did not expect the glue. That was the variable they did not account for. They expected a fist fight or a gun. They did not expect a silent chemical trap. That was why they were so terrified in the hospital. That was why they pushed so hard for the maximum sentence immediately. They were scrambling. The glue hurt them physically, but it also delayed their timeline. They needed me locked away fast, before anyone looked too closely at the paperwork. I looked at Kendra. Tears were streaming down her face. "He used me too," she said softly. "Brad told me he was making bad investments. He told me we were broke. He told me I had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital. Meanwhile, he was building a fortune with your wife on your land." She slammed her hand against the dashboard. It was a sudden, violent motion that made me jump. "They are monsters, Otis. They are not just cheaters. They are predators. They were going to put you in a cage. They were going to erase your mind and your legacy just to buy a yacht." I looked out the window at the industrial skyline of Atlanta. I saw the cranes in the distance. I saw the city changing. Men like Brad thought they owned the world. They thought men like me were just obstacles to be removed. They thought, because I wore work boots and had dirt under my fingernails, that I was stupid. They thought I was a simple animal that could be goaded into a trap. I reached for the folder again. I flipped to the bank records. I traced the money trail. Brad had set up the shell company Obsidian Holdings using his own office address. That was his mistake. Arrogance. He thought no one would ever look. He thought the police would be too busy booking me to investigate his finances. He thought Kendra was too passive to check the safe. He was wrong. I looked at the date of the land transfer again. It was notarized. I looked at the notary stamp. It was a woman named Sarah Jenkins. I knew Sarah. She worked at the bank downtown. She was a good woman. Vanessa must have tricked her or bribed her. Or maybe Vanessa just went in there with the forged papers and smiled that charming smile and said, "My husband is too sick to come in. Can you just stamp this for me?" This document proved everything. It proved the motive. It proved the conspiracy. It proved that the assault charge was part of a larger criminal enterprise. But we had to be careful. If we went to the police now, Brad's high-priced lawyers would bury this. They would say the documents were stolen. They would, I forged them to frame Brad. They would say I was desperate and making up stories. We needed more. We needed them to admit it. I looked at Kendra. She was wiping her eyes. Her expression had hardened. She looked like a woman who had nothing left to lose. "Kendra," I said, "do you still have your keys to the house?" She nodded. "Yes." "Brad thinks I am staying at my mother's. He does not know I have the spare set." "And Vanessa?" I asked. "Where is she?" "She is still in the hospital," Kendra said, "but she is being discharged tomorrow. She is going back to your house. Brad is going to stay at a hotel until his burns heal enough for him to travel. They are planning to meet with the developers on Friday. I saw the appointment in his calendar book." Friday. That was 3 days away. I closed the file folder. I put my hand on top of it. It felt hot. It felt like electricity. "We are not going to the police yet," I said. "We are going to let them think they won. We are going to let them think I am hiding in a hole somewhere terrified and broke." I looked at the forged signature one last time. "My grandfather used to tell me that a lie is like a bubble in a pipe," I said. "You can paint over it. You can cover it with insulation. But sooner or later the pressure builds up. And when it bursts, it destroys everything around it." I turned to Kendra. "You need to go back to him." She looked at me shocked. "What?" "No. I cannot look at him, Otis. I cannot be in the same room with him." "You have to," I said. "You have to play the part of the grieving, confused wife. You have to go to the hospital. You have to cry. You have to tell him you forgive him. You have to tell him you blame me." "I cannot," she whispered. "You have to," I repeated, "because we need to know where they are keeping the original deed. This is a copy. The original notarized deed is the golden ticket. If we find that we have them. And I bet my life Brad has it with him. He does not trust anyone. He has it in his briefcase or his hotel safe." Kendra took a deep breath. She looked down at her hands. She twisted her wedding ring, the symbol of a promise that Brad had shattered into a million pieces. "I will do it," she said. Her voice was steel. "I will go back. I will hold his hand. I will feed him ice chips. And I will find out where he is hiding the paper." I nodded. "And I have some work to do. I need to visit the job site. If they want to build a glass tower on my land, they should know that the foundation is not as stable as they think." I started the van. The engine roared to life, a low rumble that sounded like a beast waking up. They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to say I was a broken old man. I put the van in gear. I was going to show them exactly what a master HVAC technician can do when he decides to turn up the heat. They wanted a fire sale. I was going to give them an inferno. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in acting. If I was not a plumber, I think I could have had a career in Hollywood. I had to become exactly what Brad and Vanessa wanted me to be. I had to be the broken, defeated man. I had to be the old dog who had been kicked one too many times and was finally ready to roll over and expose his belly. I instructed my lawyer, a court-appointed attorney who seemed surprised that I was actually listening to him, to reach out to Brad's legal team. "Tell them I surrender," I said, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "Tell them I cannot go to prison. I am an old man. I have high blood pressure. I will sign whatever they want, just keep me out of a cell." My lawyer looked at me with pity. "Mr. Jackson, are you sure?" They are asking for everything. They want you to waive all claims to the marital property. They want you to acknowledge that the business assets are community property. They are essentially stripping you naked. I looked down at my hands, staring at the calluses. "Do it," I whispered. "Just get me the deal." When the news reached Brad and Vanessa, I could practically hear the champagne corks popping from across the city. Kendra told me everything. She was playing her part perfectly, too. She was the doting wife nursing her injured husband back to health while secretly recording his phone calls. She told me that when Brad got the call from his lawyer, he laughed so hard he popped a stitch in his thigh. He said, "I told you, Vanessa. Every man has a price. For Otis, the price is his freedom. He is a coward." They set the meeting for Friday night, but they did not want to do it in a law office. That was too sterile, too boring. Brad wanted a show. He wanted a victory lap. He insisted that we meet at the Gilded Chop, a high-end steakhouse in Buckhead, where the waiters wore tuxedos and the steaks cost more than my weekly grocery bill. It was a power move. He wanted me to walk into his world wearing my cheap suit and sign away my life while he ate filet mignon. He wanted to humiliate me one last time. I arrived at the restaurant at 7 o'clock sharp. I was wearing my Sunday suit, the one I wore to church and funerals. It was a little tight around the shoulders, and the fabric was worn at the elbows. I made sure to look tired. I stopped shaving for 2 days, so I had gray stubble on my chin. I slumped my shoulders. I practiced the walk of a man who has lost everything. The hostess looked at me like I was delivering a package. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, blocking the entrance to the dining room. "I am here to meet the Bradley party," I mumbled, looking at the floor. "Oh, right. They are expecting you. Follow me." She led me through the dining room. The air smelled of expensive red wine and truffle oil. I felt the eyes of the other diners on me. These were the movers and shakers of Atlanta. Politicians, developers, bankers, the people who built glass towers on top of men like me. I saw them in the back corner booth. It was the best seat in the house. Vanessa looked stunning. She was wearing a red dress that cost $2,000. She had her hair done and her makeup was flawless, covering the stress lines from the last week. But I noticed she was sitting on a special orthopedic cushion. The skin grafts on her stomach were obviously still tender. Brad was sitting next to her. He looked like a king holding court. He was wearing a cream-colored suit that highlighted his tan, but he looked uncomfortable. He kept shifting his weight, wincing every time he moved his legs. The burns on his inner thighs from the glue were evidently still screaming. Kendra was there too, sitting on the opposite side of the booth. She looked small and pale. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes on her water glass, just like we practiced. "Well, well, well," Brad said as I approached the table. "Look who decided to join the civilized world." I did not sit down immediately. I stood there holding my hat in my hands. "Hello, Brad. Hello, Vanessa." "Sit down, Otis," Vanessa said, snapping her fingers. "You are blocking the waiter." I sat down next to Kendra. The leather booth was soft. I felt out of place and they loved it. So Brad said, picking up his wine glass, "A vintage Cabernet. We have the paperwork right here. My lawyer drafted it this afternoon. It is very simple. You admit that your behavior was irrational. You agree to an uncontested divorce. You waive your rights to the property at 42 Oak Street and the commercial lot on Industrial Way. In exchange, we agree to drop the criminal charges and petition the district attorney for a dismissal based on a mental health intervention." He slid a heavy document across the white tablecloth. It was thick. It was bound in a blue folder. Essentially, Brad continued smiling, that oily smile. "We are saving your life, Otis. We are keeping you out of prison. You should be thanking us." I looked at the document. I opened it to the page where the property description was listed. There it was. My grandfather's land. The 3 acres of history that they had already stolen with a forgery, but now wanted me to sign away legally so the forgery would never be detected. If I signed this, I was validating their theft. I was covering their tracks. I looked up at Vanessa. She was cutting her steak with precise, violent motions. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why the land, Vanessa? You know what that workshop means to me." Vanessa stopped cutting. She looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Because, Otis, you are a dinosaur. You are sitting on a gold mine and you are using it to park rusty trucks. That land is worth millions. We have a vision. We are going to build something beautiful, something that actually matters, not just pipes and toilets." "So it is about the money," I said. "It is about potential," Brad interrupted. "It is about progress. And frankly, Otis, you are in the way of progress. But we are generous people. We are giving you a way out. Sign the paper, walk away, and go live out your days in a trailer somewhere. Or do not sign it, and I guarantee you will die in a prison cell." He took a sip of wine. "And trust me, prison is not a good place for a man with soft hands, let alone a man like you." I looked at Kendra. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was the signal. She had checked his briefcase while he was in the restroom. The original deed, the one with the wet ink forgery. It was in there. I took a deep breath. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a cheap ballpoint pen. I clicked it. The sound was loud in the quiet restaurant. Click, click. Brad and Vanessa leaned forward. I could see the greed in their eyes. They were so close. They could taste the $40 million. They were mentally already spending it. They were imagining the yachts and the penthouses. I put the pen to the paper. My hand shook. "Please," I whispered, "just promise me you won't tear down the old oak tree in the back." My grandfather planted it. Brad laughed. A loud barking laugh that made other diners turn around. "Sure, Otis. We will keep the tree. We will put a plaque on it, in memory of the plumber. Now sign the damn paper." I lowered the pen. I started to write. O-T-I-S. I finished the signature, but I did not sign it with my usual heavy hand. I signed it exactly the way Vanessa had forged it on the deed transfer. Light, airy, missing the pressure on the J. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. "Done," I said. Brad grabbed the folder like a starving dog grabbing a bone. He checked the signature. He grinned. "Excellent. Smart choice, Otis." He signaled the waiter. "Champagne. A bottle of Dom Perignon. We are celebrating." Vanessa let out a long sigh and leaned back against the cushion, wincing slightly as her burns touched the leather. "It is finally over," she said. "I am free." I sat there watching them celebrate. I watched the waiter pop the cork. I watched the golden liquid bubble into the flutes. I watched them toast to their victory. "To the future," Brad said, clinking his glass against Vanessa's. "To the Emerald Heights," Vanessa replied. They did not offer me a glass. They did not offer Kendra a glass. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Brad asked, his mouth full of steak. "Sit down, Otis. Have some dessert. You can afford it now that we are paying for dinner." I buttoned my jacket. I stood up straight. I rolled my shoulders back. The slump was gone. The tired look in my eyes evaporated. "I think I have lost my appetite," I said. My voice was different now. It was deeper, stronger. It was the voice of the man who ran a crew of 20 men. Vanessa frowned. She noticed the change. She put down her glass. "Otis, what is wrong with you?" "Nothing is wrong, Vanessa," I said. "Actually, for the first time in a long time, everything is right." I looked at Brad. I looked him dead in the eye. You know, Brad, in my line of work, we have a saying. Measure twice, cut once. Brad narrowed his eyes. What is that supposed to mean? It means you should have checked your measurements, I said. You see, you think you just bought a gold mine, but you actually just bought a grave. I tapped the blue folder on the table. You might want to hold on to that, I said. That document is going to be very important, not for the land transfer, but as evidence. Evidence of what Brad scoffed. Evidence of intent, I said. I smiled. It was a half smile, a cold, hard smirk that did not reach my eyes. I hope you enjoy the champagne, I said. Drink it all, because where you are going, the only drink they serve is toilet wine. I turned to Kendra. Are you coming, Kendra? Kendra stood up. She picked up her purse. She looked at her husband. Goodbye, Brad, she said. Brad looked between us, confused. Wait. Kendra, where are you going? Sit down. Kendra looked at him with pure disgust. I am going with Otis, she said. We have an early appointment tomorrow. Appointment with who? Vanessa demanded, her voice rising. With the district attorney, I said. And the FBI. The silence at the table was deafening. The clinking of silverware around us seemed to stop. Brad's face went pale beneath his tan. I turned and walked away. I walked through the dining room with my head held high. I did not look like a defeated man anymore. I looked like a man on a mission. As I reached the door, I heard Brad's chair scrape against the floor. I heard him yelp in pain as he tried to stand up too fast. Otis, come back here, he shouted. I did not stop. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked out into the cool night air. Kendra was right beside me. We did it, she whispered. We got him to accept the signature. I nodded. We got him. He just accepted a document that proves he was trying to coerce me. And since I signed it using the forgery style, he just confirmed that he recognizes that signature as valid, which means he just validated the fake deed in front of witnesses. I looked back at the restaurant window. I could see Brad and Vanessa arguing. The celebration was over. The panic was setting in. The trap had snapped shut. And this time I did not use glue. I used their own greed. And it was going to hold them tighter than any chemical ever could. We walked to my van parked around the corner from the steakhouse. The night air was cool, but my skin was burning with adrenaline. Kendra was walking so fast she was practically jogging, trying to keep up with my long strides. When we got inside the cab of the truck, she locked the door and let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Otis, she said, her voice shaking. That was insane. We just walked out on them. We just baited them. But what if the document is not enough? What if Brad's lawyers say he signed it under duress? What if they say you tricked him? He has the best attorneys in the state. They could spin this. They could say you were menacing him. I sat there in the darkness of the parking lot, listening to the engine tick as it cooled down. I reached into the glove compartment. I moved aside a box of fuses and a tire gauge. I pulled out a small black device. It was a digital voice recorder, the kind I used to record client notes when I was under a house and could not write. I looked at Kendra in the pale light of the street lamp. The document is just the nail, I said. This is the hammer. Kendra looked at the recorder confused. What is that? I leaned back in the seat, staring at the small red light on the side of the device. Do you remember the ambulance? I asked. Do you remember when they were loading them in? It was chaos. People were shouting. Mrs. Jenkins was filming. The paramedics were trying to figure out how to lift 2 people at once. Kendra nodded slowly. Yes. It was a nightmare. I turned the device over in my hand. Well, I said, while everyone was watching the spectacle, I got close. I mean, really close. I leaned in to mock Brad. I told him I had managed his assets. But that wasn't just trash talk. That was a distraction. I closed my eyes, remembering the moment. The smell of the chemical glue. The heat radiating off their bodies. Brad's pants had been cut down the sides by the paramedics to check for circulation. The fabric was hanging loose. In that split second, while Brad was screaming at me and Vanessa was crying, I slipped this recorder into the back pocket of his cut trousers. It was small. He didn't feel a thing. He was in too much pain to notice an extra ounce of weight. Kendra's eyes went wide. You bugged him. I nodded. I knew they would be alone in the back of that ambulance for at least 20 minutes while they drove to the hospital. I knew the paramedics would be busy up front driving or checking vitals. I knew that in the privacy of that metal box, thinking they were safe from my ears, they would talk. And I knew they wouldn't talk about love. They would talk about fear. And people who are afraid make mistakes. But how did you get it back? Kendra asked. Brad would have found it when they took his clothes off. I smiled. You got it back, Kendra. Me, she whispered. I handed her the recorder. Remember the bag of personal effects, the plastic bag the nurse gave you at the hospital, the one with Brad's watch, his wallet, and his ruined clothes. You gave it to me yesterday when we met at the warehouse because you didn't want to look at it. You didn't even open it. You just wanted it out of your sight. I opened that bag this morning. I dug through the sticky, ruined fabric of those expensive trousers, and I found this. I pressed the play button. The sound that filled the cab of the truck was staticky at first. There was the loud wail of the siren, the rumble of the tires on the pavement. Then there were the moans of pain. Please make it stop. Brad's voice on the recording was thin and high-pitched. It burns. God, it burns. Just shut up, Brad. Vanessa's voice snapped. It was not the voice of a loving partner. It was the voice of a conspirator who was watching her plan fall apart. Shut up and think. He knows. Otis knows. He doesn't know anything. Brad groaned. He just found the lube. He is just a jealous old man. Listen to me, Vanessa hissed. The audio was clear enough to hear the panic in her breath. He was filming. He put that online. This is going to bring attention. Police attention. If they start digging into our finances, if they look at the land transfer before we can sell it, we are dead. There was a pause on the tape, just the sound of the siren and heavy breathing. Then Brad spoke. His voice was clearer now, more focused. The land transfer is solid, he said. The notary is taken care of. Are you sure? Vanessa asked. Sarah Jenkins is nervous. She called me yesterday. She said she doesn't like forging the logbook. She will do what she is told, Brad said. I paid her $5,000 cash, and Judge Holloway is lined up for the competency hearing. I sent the wire to his offshore account this morning. 50 grand. As soon as Otis is arrested, the judge will sign the emergency guardianship order. He will declare Otis mentally unfit. You get power of attorney. We sell the land to Obsidian Holdings. We demolish the workshop next week. Once the building is down, nobody can prove anything. I hit the pause button. The silence in the truck was heavy. Kendra was staring at the dashboard, her mouth slightly open. Her face was pale. They bought a judge, she whispered. A judge. I nodded. Judge Holloway. I know him. He is the one who presides over probate court. He is the one who would have decided my fate. They didn't just plan to steal my land. They planned to buy the law. I pressed play again. But what if Otis fights it? Vanessa asked on the tape. He can't fight it from a jail cell, Brad replied. And with the injuries we have, the DA will have to deny bail. We just stick to the story. Otis is crazy. Otis is violent. Otis attacked us. We play the victims. We cry in court. The judge does the rest. By the time Otis gets a hearing, the condos will already be under construction. The recording dissolved into moans of pain as the ambulance hit a bump. I turned off the recorder. I looked at Kendra. That I said, holding up the black box. That is conspiracy. That is bribery of a public official. That is wire fraud. That is perjury. And that is a confession to forgery. Kendra let out a long, shaky breath. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. They are evil, she said softly. I mean, I knew they were bad. I knew they were greedy. But this is organized crime. Exactly, I said. They aren't just cheaters, Kendra. They are racketeers. And tonight, when they were drinking that champagne, they thought they had won. They thought getting me to sign that paper was the final step. I put the recorder back in my pocket. What they don't realize, I said, starting the engine, is that by accepting that signature tonight, Brad confirmed he knows what my signature looks like. He accepted the forged style as the real style. He walked right into the trap. And this tape proves that he knew all along it was a fake. I pulled the truck out of the parking spot. Where are we going? Kendra asked. We are going to a friend of mine, I said. His name is Agent Miller. He works for the FBI field office in Atlanta. I fixed his furnace last winter. He gave me his card and said if I ever needed anything, I should call. I looked at the road ahead. The city lights were blurring in the rain. I think a bribed judge and a multi-million-dollar real estate fraud scheme qualifies as something he would want to know about. Kendra looked at me. For the first time in days, she smiled. It was a real smile. A smile of hope. Otis, she said, you really are good at fixing things. I gripped the steering wheel. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I don't just fix things, Kendra, I said. I flush the system. And right now there is a big clog at the top that needs to be cleared out. We drove through the night, leaving the restaurant and the lies behind us. The recording in my pocket felt heavy, but it was a good weight. It was the weight of truth. And tomorrow morning when I played this for the feds, it was going to weigh a hell of a lot more on Brad and Vanessa. They wanted to be stuck together. Well, they were about to be stuck in a federal indictment, and no amount of glue solvent was going to get them out of that one. The Fulton County Superior Court smelled of floor wax and old wood. It was the smell of judgment. The air conditioning was humming low, but the room felt stifling. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded calmly on the scarred oak surface. To my left sat my attorney, Viola King. Viola and I went back 30 years. She was the daughter of the deacon at my church, and I had fixed the pipes in her first starter home for free when she was just a law student. Now she was one of the sharpest criminal defense attorneys in Atlanta. She wore a navy blue suit that looked like armor and her eyes behind her glasses were like lasers. Across the aisle sat the prosecution, and behind them, in the front row of the gallery, sat the victims, Brad and Vanessa. They looked like royalty who had been forced to mingle with peasants. Brad was wearing a charcoal suit that was cut to accommodate the bandages on his legs. He had a cane resting against his knee, a prop to garner sympathy. Vanessa was dressed in white, the color of innocence. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue every time the jury looked her way. They looked confident. They looked like they had already won. They thought this was just a formality before they collected their prize. The prosecutor was a young man who looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. He stood up and gave his opening statement. He painted a picture of me that was unrecognizable. He called me a violent, jealous man who could not handle the success of his wife. He described the glue incident as a torture trap designed to inflict maximum pain. He used words like malice and premeditation. He told the jury that I was a danger to society and that I should be put away for the maximum term of 10 years. When he finished, Brad nodded solemnly, and Vanessa let out a practiced sob. The jury looked at me with suspicion. I did not blame them. The story sounded convincing if you did not know the context. Then it was Viola's turn. She did not stand up immediately. She took a sip of water. She arranged her papers. She let the silence stretch out until everyone in the room was leaning forward. Then she stood up. She did not walk to the jury box. She walked toward the witness stand, where Brad was waiting to testify. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Viola began, her voice rich and steady. The prosecution wants you to believe that this case is about a tube of glue. They want you to believe it is about a husband's revenge. But they are looking at the wrong crime. This case is not about assault. It is about a robbery in progress. Objection, the prosecutor shouted. There is no robbery charge here. Overruled, the judge said, leaning forward. I want to hear where she is going with this. Viola smiled. It was a shark's smile. Thank you, Your Honor. You see, the defense does not deny that Mr. Jackson placed industrial adhesive in a bottle. We do not deny that Mr. Bradley and Mrs. Jackson suffered injuries. What we deny is the motive. Mr. Jackson did not act out of jealousy. He acted to stop a criminal enterprise that was in the process of stealing his life's work. She turned to Brad. Mr. Bradley, you are a financial advisor, is that correct? You hold a Series 7 license and you are a fiduciary bound by law to act in your client's best interests. Brad straightened his tie, looking annoyed. Yes, that is correct. I am a top-rated advisor in the city. And as an advisor, you understand the penalties for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery, Viola asked. Brad scoffed. I am the victim here. Why are you asking me about fraud? Viola walked back to our table and picked up a file. It was the blue folder. The same one Brad had handed me at the steakhouse. Your Honor, I would like to submit Defense Exhibit A. This is a property transfer deed dated 3 weeks ago. It purports to transfer the defendant's commercial property to a shell company called Obsidian Holdings, a company controlled by Mr. Bradley. She handed the document to the bailiff. Brad shifted in his seat. He looked at Vanessa. Vanessa stopped dabbing her eyes and went rigid. And I would like to submit Defense Exhibit B. Viola continued, holding up a small black flash drive. This is an audio recording taken on the day of the incident inside the ambulance transporting the victims. Objection, the prosecutor yelled again. That is hearsay. It was recorded without consent. Actually, Viola said, calm as ice, Georgia is a one-party consent state. And since the recording device was legally in the possession of my client at the time of placement, it is admissible. Furthermore, under the crime fraud exception, attorney-client privilege or spousal privilege does not apply when the parties are discussing the commission of a future crime. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Play the tape." Viola plugged the drive into the court system. My heart started beating a little faster. This was it. The sound of the siren filled the courtroom. It was loud and piercing. Then came the screams. The jury winced. But then came the voices. "If they start digging into our finances, if they look at the land transfer, before we can sell it, we are dead." That was Vanessa's voice, clear as a bell. Then came Brad's voice. "The notary is taken care of. I paid her $5,000 cash. Judge Holloway is lined up for the competency hearing." A gasp went through the courtroom. I saw the court reporter stop typing. I saw the judge's face turn a shade of red I had never seen before. Judge Holloway was a colleague of his. The mention of a bribed judge in open court was a nuclear bomb. "We sell the land to Obsidian Holdings. We demolish the workshop next week. Once the building is down, nobody can prove anything." Viola stopped the tape. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. Brad's face was no longer tan. It was gray. It was the color of wet ash. He looked at his lawyer, who was frantically whispering something to him, but Brad wasn't listening. He was staring at the exit sign. He knew. In that moment, he knew his life was over. He wasn't just losing a case. He was losing his license. He was losing his firm. He was losing his freedom. Viola turned back to him. "Mr. Bradley, on the recording you admitted to bribing a notary. You admitted to bribing a judge. You admitted to a conspiracy to declare Mr. Jackson mentally incompetent in order to steal a property valued at $40 million. She picked up the forged deed, and 2 nights ago at the Gilded Chop restaurant, you coerced my client into signing a divorce agreement that validated this forged signature. You thought you were tricking a simple plumber. But what you were actually doing was confirming your own intent to defraud." She looked at the jury. "My client used glue to stop 2 people from having an affair. These 2 people used the legal system to try and steal a man's legacy, his dignity, and his sanity. I ask you, who is the real criminal here?" The prosecutor looked at the judge. He looked at the evidence. He slowly started putting his papers back into his briefcase. He knew when a ship was sinking. The judge slammed his gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. "Bailiff, take the jury out," the judge roared. He pointed a finger at Brad. "You, do not move, not 1 inch." The jury filed out, looking back at Brad and Vanessa with pure disgust. The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Counsel, the court is dismissing the assault charges against Mr. Jackson with prejudice. It is clear that the actions taken by the accusers were part of a larger criminal conspiracy to entrap and defraud the defendant." He then turned his gaze to Brad and Vanessa. "Mr. Bradley, Mrs. Jackson, you came into my courtroom seeking justice. You found it. I am holding you both in contempt of court immediately, and I am ordering the bailiff to take you into custody pending a federal investigation into wire fraud, forgery, and the corruption of a public official." Brad tried to stand up. "Your Honor, please," he stammered. "It was just talk. We were in pain. We didn't mean it." "Sit down," the judge shouted. 2 deputies moved in. They were not gentle. They pulled Brad up by his arms. His cane fell to the floor with a clatter. He yelped as the movement pulled at his healing burns. They cuffed his hands behind his back. Vanessa began to scream. Not the angry scream from the car. This was a scream of pure terror. No, I can't go to jail. I have a medical condition. I am a victim." "Otis," she yelled, looking at me. "Otis, tell them. Tell them we were just joking. Please, I am your wife. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at the woman I had shared 20 years with. The woman who had looked at me with such contempt just a few days ago. Now she was begging. She was reduced to nothing. I looked at Viola and nodded. Then I looked at Vanessa. You were my wife, Vanessa, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. But you fired me. And just like any bad employee who steals from the company, you have to face the consequences. The deputies led them away. Brad was weeping openly now, dragging his feet. Vanessa was hyperventilating. The doors closed behind them, cutting off their pleas. The judge looked at me. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Mr. Jackson, he said, I apologize that your court system was almost weaponized against you. You are free to go. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Atlanta sunshine. Kendra was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps. She ran up and hugged me. She was crying, but they were happy tears. We did it, she sobbed. They are gone. I looked back at the massive stone building. I saw the news vans pulling up. The story of the bribed judge was already leaking out. This was going to be the biggest scandal in the city. I put my arm around Kendra's shoulders. Come on, Kendra, I said. Let's go get some lunch. I know a place that makes great barbecue, and I promise no one will try to sell us a bridge while we are eating. I felt lighter than I had in years. The glue had done its job. It had stuck the bad guys together and dragged them straight down to the bottom. And me. I was unglued. I was free. I was Otis Jackson. And I was just getting started on the renovation of my life. The collapse of a man like Brad does not happen all at once. It happens in stages. First comes the denial, then comes the anger, and finally comes the realization that the check has finally bounced and there are insufficient funds to cover the cost of his sins. I stood in the marble hallway outside the courtroom and watched the first stage of his destruction. Brad was not going quietly. He was struggling against the bailiffs, his expensive suit bunching up around his shoulders. He was shouting about his rights. He was shouting about making phone calls to the governor. He still did not get it. He still thought he was playing a game where the rules could be bent if you knew the right people. But the rules had changed, and the players had changed too. As the deputies dragged him toward the elevators, the metal doors pinged open. 4 men stepped out. They were not wearing sheriff uniforms. They were wearing blue windbreakers with 3 yellow letters printed on the back. FBI. The leader of the group was Agent Miller. I gave him a small nod. He returned it. He walked straight up to Brad, and the deputies stopped. Bradley Stevens, Agent Miller, said, his voice cutting through Brad's shouting like a knife. I am placing you under arrest for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Brad froze. The fight went out of him instantly. He looked at the badge hanging around Miller's neck. Federal Brad whispered, This is a mistake. I am a financial advisor. I run a legitimate firm. Miller laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. We have been watching Obsidian Holdings for 6 months, Brad. We knew you were washing money. We just did not know where it was coming from until a concerned citizen handed us a flash drive with your voice on it, admitting to everything. You confessed to structured deposits. You confessed to bribing a judge. You gave us the roadmap to your entire operation. Brad looked at me. His eyes were wide with shock. He realized then that I had not just caught him cheating. I had handed him over to the wolves. But I have bail, Brad stammered. My lawyer will get me bail. Miller shook his head. Not for this. The amount of money you moved triggers a mandatory detention hearing, and since you were caught discussing fleeing the country to the Caribbean, you are a flight risk. You are not going home, Brad. You are going to the Federal Detention Center, and you are going to be there for a very long time. The agents moved in. They took over from the deputies. They switched the handcuffs. The sound of those heavy federal cuffs clicking shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. But the show was not over. There was one more act. Kendra stepped forward. She was holding a thick manila envelope. She walked right up to Brad. She stood toe to toe with him. For years, he had made her feel small. He had made her feel stupid. He had made her feel like she was lucky just to be in his shadow. Now she was the giant, and he was the insect. Kendra, baby, Brad said, his voice trembling. You have to help me. Call the accounts manager. Get the emergency funds. We can fight this. I can fix this. Just get me the money. Kendra looked at him with a calm expression that terrified him more than the FBI agents. There is no we, Brad, she said. And there is no money. She slapped the envelope against his chest. One of the agents caught it before it fell. What is this? Brad asked. It is divorce papers, Kendra said, and a restraining order, and an eviction notice. Brad sneered. You cannot evict me. That is my house, I paid for it, and you cannot take my money. We have a prenuptial agreement. Remember, I made you sign it. What is mine is mine. Kendra smiled. It was a smile that had been years in the making. I remember the prenup, Brad. I read it again this morning. Do you remember Section 8, Paragraph 4? The infidelity clause. You insisted on it. You said that if either of us was caught cheating, the other party would be entitled to 100% of the marital assets, including all properties and investments. Brad's face went white. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. You wrote it that way because you thought I would cheat, Kendra. Continued. You wanted to make sure that if I ever left you, I would leave with nothing. You never thought it would apply to you because you thought you were too smart to get caught. She pointed to the agents. But you did get caught, Brad. And not just by me, by the FBI, by the court, by Otis. The infidelity is a matter of public record now. It is in the court transcripts. You admitted to it on the tape. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent hallway. So according to the contract you wrote, I get everything. I get the house, I get the cars, I get the vacation home, I get the retirement accounts, or at least what is left of them before the government seizes the dirty money. Brad looked like he was going to be sick. He sagged in the agent's grip. The money was his god. He could handle prison, maybe. He could handle shame. But poverty was his worst nightmare. You can't do this, he whimpered. I will fight you. I will hire the best lawyers. With what money? Kendra asked. I just froze your personal accounts, Brad. I used your power of attorney against you, the one you gave me years ago for emergencies. Well, this is an emergency. I transferred the liquid assets to a secure trust this morning. You don't have a dime to pay a lawyer. You are going to have to use a public defender. The color drained from Brad's face completely. He looked at his shoes, his Italian loafers that cost $1,000. He realized they were the last expensive thing he would ever wear. Take him away, Kendra said to Agent Miller. I am done with him. Miller nodded. Let's go, Stevens. You have a long day ahead of you. They marched him down the hall. Brad did not scream anymore. He did not fight. He walked like a zombie. He was a man who had been hollowed out. He had lost his freedom, his reputation, and his fortune in the span of an hour. I watched him go. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Kendra. She was trembling, but she was standing tall. "Thank you, Otis," she said. "Thank you for showing me how to fight." I patted her hand. "You did the fighting, Kendra. I just gave you the tools." We watched the elevator doors close on Brad's face. The last thing I saw was his eyes. They were empty. He was looking into an abyss of his own making. I turned to Kendra. So I asked, "You are a wealthy woman now. What are you going to do with the house?" She laughed. A free, clear laugh. "I am going to sell it," she said. "It smells like him. I am going to sell it and buy a small place with a big garden, and I am going to use the rest of the money to pay for my kids' college, and maybe I will take a vacation. A real one. Somewhere without cell service." "That sounds like a good plan," I said. "And Otis," she added, "I am going to pay your legal fees, every cent, and I am going to pay for the restoration of your workshop. I know you said the developer plans were fake, but the legal battle cost you time and stress." I shook my head. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," she said. "We are family Otis, the real kind, not the kind that stabs you in the back, the kind that pulls you out of the wreckage." I nodded. I accepted it. Not because I needed the money, but because I knew she needed to give it. It was part of her healing. We walked out of the courthouse together. The sun was high in the sky. The city of Atlanta was bustling around us. People were rushing to meetings. Cars were honking. Life was moving on. But for Brad, life had stopped. He was now just a number in the federal system. I took a deep breath of the hot city air. It smelled of exhaust and asphalt, but to me it smelled like freedom. "One down," I said. "One to go." Kendra's face hardened. "Vanessa," she said. "Yes," I said. "Vanessa. She doesn't have a prenup, but she has something worse coming. She has a husband who knows where all the bodies are buried. And she is about to find out that while Brad lost his money, she is going to lose something she values even more. Her image." We walked toward my truck. The job wasn't finished yet. I was a master plumber, and I never left a job until every pipe was sealed and every drain was clear. Vanessa was the last clog in the system, and I had the plunger ready. The following Sunday afternoon, the air around 42 Oak Street smelled like hickory smoke and brown sugar. I was back at my grill where I belonged. The old oak tree that my grandfather planted was shading the yard, its leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. But this time the atmosphere was different. It was lighter. Kendra was sitting at the picnic table laughing as her twin boys chased my dog around the yard. For the first time in months, the laughter was real. It was not forced. It was the sound of a family that had walked through the fire and come out the other side without getting burned. I flipped a rack of ribs and brushed them with my secret sauce. I watched the glaze bubble and caramelize. I was a man at peace. The legal battles were over. The FBI had seized Brad's assets. The deed to my land was secure in a safe deposit box at a bank that Brad had never touched. Then I heard a car pull up to the curb. It was not a luxury SUV. It was not a sports car. It was a beat-up yellow taxi. The laughter in the yard died down. Kendra stopped smiling. She put a protective hand on her son's shoulder. We all watched as the back door of the taxi opened. Vanessa stepped out. She looked like a stranger. The woman who had spent thousands of dollars on Botox and designer dresses was gone. In her place was a woman who looked 10 years older than her age. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt. She had no makeup on, and in the harsh light of day I could see the lines of stress etched deep into her face. She was holding a small plastic grocery bag, which I guessed contained everything she currently owned. She paid the driver with crumpled bills and stood on the sidewalk looking at the house. She looked at the flower beds she used to complain about. She looked at the porch she had wanted to tear down. She looked at me. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the gate. I did not open it. I stood on my side of the fence, the side that belonged to me. "Otis," she said softly. Her voice was cracked and dry. "Hello, Vanessa," I said. She took a step closer, clutching the plastic bag to her chest. "I have nowhere to go, Otis. Brad's lawyers dropped me. The court seized my accounts because they said the money was commingled with the fraud. My sister won't talk to me. My friends won't answer my calls. I spent the last 3 nights in a motel on the highway, but I ran out of money." She looked past me at the house. "This is my home, Otis. We were married for 20 years. You can't just throw me away. I made a mistake. I was confused. Brad manipulated me. He told me you were holding me back. He told me we could be rich. I was weak, Otis, please. You are a good man. You are a Christian man. You have to forgive me." I listened to her. I listened to the woman who had called me a dinosaur, the woman who had mocked my dirty hands, the woman who had planned to lock me in a mental institution so she could sell my grandfather's legacy for a condo tower. I looked back at Kendra. She was watching us, her face hard as stone. She gave me a small nod. She trusted me. I turned back to Vanessa. "You are right, Vanessa," I said. "I am a good man, and I am a forgiving man. I forgive you for the cheating. I forgive you for the lies. I even forgive you for the insults." Vanessa's face lit up with hope. She took a step toward the gate, reaching for the latch. "Oh, thank God, Otis. I knew you would understand. I can stay in the guest room. I will cook. I will clean. We can start over. We can fix this." I put my hand over the latch, holding it shut. "I forgive you," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "But forgiving you does not mean I am stupid." Vanessa froze. Her hand hovered in the air. "You said Brad manipulated you," I continued. "But I heard the tape, Vanessa. I heard your voice. You weren't confused. You were the one driving the ambulance. You were the one who suggested bribing the judge. You were the one who forged my signature. Brad was a thief, yes, but you were the architect." I reached into the pocket of my apron. I pulled out a small tube. It was not a weapon. It was a tool. It was a tube of super glue, the cheap kind you buy at the gas station for $1. Vanessa looked at the tube and flinched. She took a step back, fear flashing in her eyes. "What is that?" she whispered. I held it out to her over the fence. "You want to fix things, Vanessa?" I asked. "You said you want to repair what is broken." She stared at the glue, her hands shaking. "I am a plumber," I said. "When a pipe is burst, you can patch it. When a seal is blown, you can replace it. But when the entire foundation is rotten, you don't fix it. You condemn it." I tossed the tube of glue. It landed in the grass at her feet. "Take this," I said. "It is strong stuff. Maybe not as strong as the PVC cement I used on your lover, but it should work for you." "Work for what?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Use it to glue the pieces of your life back together," I said. "Because you are not coming back in here. You sold this house for $10, remember? You signed the deed. You wanted the money more than the home. Now you have neither. I turned my back on her. Otis, please, she screamed. Otis, don't do this. I am your wife. I walked back towards the grill. I walked back toward the warmth of the fire and the people who actually loved me. I am not your husband anymore, Vanessa, I called out over my shoulder. I am just the guy who fixed the leak. I heard her sobbing behind me. I heard her calling my name. But I did not stop. I walked up the steps of the porch. I looked at Kendra and the boys. Is she gone? One of the twins asked, looking scared. I smiled at him. Yes, son, I said. She is gone, and she is not coming back. I walked into the house and closed the heavy oak door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. It was the sound of a chapter ending. It was the sound of a final seal being set. I looked around my living room. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was mine. Outside, Vanessa was left on the sidewalk with a tube of glue and a bag of regrets. Inside, I had everything I needed. I had my dignity. I had my family. And most importantly, I had the truth. The repair was complete. The system was clean. And for the first time in 20 years, the pressure was perfectly balanced. They say that water always finds a way. You can try to block it. You can try to divert it. But eventually it goes where it wants to go. The truth is exactly the same. Brad and Vanessa thought they could build a dam of lies to hold back the river of their greed. They thought they could bury the truth under layers of legal paperwork and false accusations. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that they were dealing with a man who has spent 40 years mastering the flow of pressure. Don't ever underestimate a plumber. We are the invisible men who keep civilization running. We crawl in the dirt so you can live in comfort. We know how to seal the smallest leaks to save a home. But we also know exactly where to strike to blow up the entire system if that system is corrupt. Brad looked at my dirty hands and saw weakness. He did not realize that those hands were strong enough to dismantle his entire life brick by brick. I look at my hands now. They are still rough. They are still stained with grease, but they are clean in the eyes of the law and the eyes of God. I saved my grandfather's legacy. I saved my dignity. And I helped a good woman save herself and her children from a predator. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it is this. Pay attention to the pressure gauges in your life. The small signs. The receipts in the trash. The sudden changes in behavior. The documents you are asked to sign without reading. These are the warnings before the pipe bursts. And I want to speak directly to the women watching this right now. Please listen to Otis. Do not let love make you blind to your own security. Do not let a man tell you that he handles the finances so you do not have to worry your pretty little head about it. That is not love, that is control. Go to the county recorder's office. Check the deed to your house. Check your credit report. Make sure your name is on the assets you helped build. Because when the love runs dry, the only thing that will keep a roof over your head is the ink on that paper. Kendra was lucky because she had me. But you might not have a plumber in your corner. You have to be your own inspector. I am sitting here by my grill watching the sun go down over the land that will stay in my family for another generation. The air smells like freedom. It is a sweet smell. Much better than the smell of industrial glue, I can tell you that. If my story made you cheer, or if it made you angry, or if it just made you double-check your own marriage, leave me a comment below. I want to know what you would have done if you found that bottle under the seat. Would you have used the glue? Or would you have done something even crazier? Let me know in the comments. And please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share these stories with more people who might need a wake-up call. My name is Otis Jackson. I am a father. I am a survivor. And I am the man who proved that the strongest bond in the world is not chemical. It is the truth. Thank you for watching, and remember to keep your pipes clean and your eyes open. See you in the next story.